Hello. Today I am going to be sewing in the signature for the journal, and I've created two templates. I have also created them on US paper size, and on US I have created them for the 8.5 by 11-inch paper. You must print at 100%. The width should be perfect for 2.5-inch spine. One is a 5-hole pamphlet stitch with the 5 signatures, and one is a 3-hole pamphlet stitch for 5 signatures, and you can decide which one you download. They're going to be on my KoFi site. So the height we will talk about. The width should be perfect if you cut on the outside lines and you print at 100%. Now, the fabulous Jodie Lewis has given me an amazing amount of support with this, checking the US paper, and it will depend if you use a mobile or an iPad and you're not printing at 100%, you might find a bit of an issue. But those templates will be on my KoFi site. You can decide if you use them or not. So we cut a second piece of board the same size as our spine. So I'm going to cut my templates out, and I'm using a 5-hole pamphlet stitch for my journal. If you want something a little bit simpler, then you can use the 3-hole pamphlet stitch. I'm going to link my video on how to do this here, because I'm not quite sure how I'm going to be able to manage sewing in my signatures. So I'm going to link another video for you just in case. I'm using a knife. I'm cutting on the outside of that line. It's not as important for the top and bottom because many of us will not be printing full bleed. So we're not going to have the full height of our journal. And as you can see, the dots on the spine and the dots for the signature template will all line up perfectly. I just thought it would make it nice and easy for you if I created a template. I'm gonna cut those outside white lines, but I'm not gonna cut between the templates at the moment. So I'll do that. And now I'm going to grab just the front page of my first signature. And what I want to do is just check the height. And you will see, because I've made the template the full height of a sheet of paper, we've got a little gap. So I'm going to take my pencil and just do a little line top and bottom, because we do need to adjust the height to our pages. And it's not a measurement as such, because I can't tell what your printer is going to print at. So now I've got those lines, I'm going to line that straight edge up on my cutting board, use my ruler and my knife, and I'm going to just trim that little bit off the top and the bottom of my template. And now I've done that, I'm going to cut the templates apart. So everything stays nice and even. I'm going to write top on both of my templates and make sure they're both the same way round. Now I'm going to take my ruler and line it up as close to the centre of those dots on the signature template as I possibly can. I'm going to use the sharpest edge of my bone folder and push that against my ruler. So I'm going to have a nice clean fold. I'm going to fold that over. And now that should be nice and straight down the centre. I'm going to take my awl and put my holes in. You don't need to do that at this stage. You can do it when it's in your first signature, but I just put those guidelines in now. So now we can see that the template is going to fit in our signature and be top and bottom. It's going to be a really good fit. Now I'm going to prepare my spine. Now we cut the spine to the full height of our book, and I need to now trim that down to be the same size as our template. So I'm going to line those up, and they should fit pretty perfectly. So I'm going to line them up, use my ruler and my knife, and just trim the bottom off that template. Now I've done that, I'm going to grab a piece of calico fabric. You can use absolutely any fabric you choose. I'm using my EVA glue, and I'm just going to grab a brush. So I'm grabbing my brush and starting to add my glue, and realise I probably need a piece of paper to shield my fabric. So I'm going to make sure I glue to the edge, making sure I give that a really good coat. You can use any glue that you are confident in. Fabri-Tac would obviously work perfectly because we are working with fabric. So I'm just going to coat that completely. Once that's covered, I'm going to lay it in the centre of my fabric. It doesn't have to be perfect, but get it as close as I can. And then I'm just going to burnish the fabric down on the other side. You can probably tell I didn't iron the fabric before I started. And I'm just going to make sure that's nicely glued. Once I'm happy with that, I've got a wider ruler that I like to use. I butt it against that spine and just cut off a little piece of that fabric, the edge. I just want to make sure it's not too long, but it is going to reach the covers of my journal. So I'm just going to trim both of those sides down and use that same ruler either side. Once I've done that, what I'm going to do is just grab my journal cover so I can show you how nicely this should fit. It's obviously going to fit perfectly on the width because we cut both of those pieces of board at the same time, and I've got a little gap at the top and the bottom, and I'll be able to glue the fabric down to hide the edge of that board, and you can see that's perfect fit. So I'm just going to have a really quick look and see what my signatures are going to look like once they're in there. So they will fit nicely. Now I'm going to take my template for the spine, and I'm going to fold that fabric underneath. It will self-heal, so if I put some holes through that fabric, it's not going to matter. They will disappear. So I'm going to fold that over, and then I'm going to line my template up to that spine. It's very easy to feel it through the fabric. Line it up. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to grab my awl and I'm going to pierce all of those holes, and I'm going to make sure I'm going all the way through to my board at the back. And I do take my time with this. You don't want to rush it. Make sure you've got your holes nice and spaced out. And now you can see all our holes. I did make a little bit of an error on one, but that really isn't going to make any difference once I start to sew in my signatures. So our holes are all done, and like I said, we may have some holes in that fabric, but it's self-healing, so with a little bit of a rub, by the time we're done, you won't see any of those holes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a tiny little black mark at the top of my fabric. I know it's too tall for my journal, so it's not going to show, but I want to know that is the top. So I've got a really thick book. You can get cradles to do this, but I've got a really nice thick dictionary. Any large book will work. Fold it into the middle, and we're going to take our signatures and start from the back signature. So I'm going to take my signature, open it up from at the centre and really push from the top and the bottom to make sure they're evenly lined up. I'm going to put my template in, and what I'm going to do is grab a couple of binder clips, fold it over to make sure you're really pushing that spine into the centre and everything is going to be nice and even. It's worth spending a little bit of time on this just to make sure everything is lined up properly. Once I'm happy, put those binder clips on, line my spine up with the centre of my book, and I'm going to use my awl and go through those holes and through my signature. I probably did go a little bit too far, but I just make sure that hole has come through and is perfect. So I'm now going to just poke the rest of those holes in my signatures. When you're done, just double check the holes have come all the way through. I'm going to leave the binder clip in place, but just take my template out because I now need that for the rest of my signatures. That one's now done. I'm going to put that aside. Same with the next signature. I'm just pushing it top and bottom, making sure that's really tight, putting a little fold and pushing that template into the centre of my spine. And then I will add my binder clips. Once the binder clips are in place, again, I'm going to take my awl and push my holes through my signature. Once I'm done, I'm just going to check all of my holes have come through. I'm going to remove that template, and then I'm going to continue to do my last signatures. Now all of my signatures are done, so I have my 5 signatures. All of the holes are in place and nicely lined up. I've kept the binder clips on. You might find this a little bit more tricky when you sew in. Sometimes it's easy to get your cotton caught round there, but I prefer to leave them in place, and I know I'm not going to struggle getting my needle through my signatures. This is the cotton I use. It is a linen thread. It is from Shepherds of London. I don't know where else you can buy it, but if you want to pause, you can have a look at the thread I use. This is quite a thin thread. When you get towards the end of the roll, it's quite difficult. This is a waxed linen thread. It's much cheaper and it's actually much more user-friendly if you're a beginner. It keeps its shape, it doesn't slip. So you might want to consider using something like that. I, however, just like this linen thread. I don't wax it, I leave it as it is. I'm going to grab a needle for sewing. I use something quite sharp. You might want to use something a little bit bigger if you're using the wax linen thread. Basically, you need to make sure your thread is going to fit through the eye of the needle you've chosen. Now, I pull off 3 lengths of cotton. It's too much, but I would much prefer to have too much than sew in half my signature and realise I don't have enough. So I do waste a little bit of my cotton thread. That's just how I work. I'm going to cut that to my size. I'm going to thread my needle, and I do have a little pin cushion. I do find that quite useful in between signatures. So I'm going to thread my needle, and at the other end, to make sure it doesn't pull all of the way through as I'm sewing, I'm going to grab a binder clip and just pop a binder clip a couple of inches from the bottom of my thread. And I realised my phone had actually stopped recording because it had run out of space. You can see I have sewn in my back signature. I have used those binder clips to hold that signature closed. I'm now going to move forward a signature. So signature number 4, a Christmas crush. This is the one I'm going to sew next. So turn your journal over. I'm sewing from the back. You go into that centre hole and bring your needle up into the front of your spine. It won't come all the way through because we've got that binder clip there. I'm going to take that signature and come through the middle hole into the centre of my signature. So pull the needle through, and I'm not going to pull it too tight, but you can see the thread there. I now move up to the next hole, through the signature and then through my spine. So pull that needle all of the way through. So we've gone into the centre and up one. We're now going to go in through the top hole. I'm moving my journal around to make sure this is comfortable. Do whatever you need to do to make sure you can do this as comfortably as you can. Pull that thread through the spine, and now I'm going to go in through my signature. Pull the needle through. And now we are going to snake down to that hole below again. So through the signature and through the spine, pull that through. And now we're going to skip that middle hole. We don't go back through the middle hole, we come down to the next one. So through the spine and then through the signature. Pull the needle through, and now we are going down to that last hole that we haven't used yet, through the signature, then through the spine. And like I said, I'm still not pulling everything tight at this stage. And now we are going to go up to the next hole again, through the spine and through the signature. And now we're going to go, the last stitch is back through that centre hole. So push it through the signature and then through the spine. Now we've got a loose thread at the back. We've got that one long stitch that misses that centre hole, and we want to make sure we've got one thread one side and we bring the needle up the other side. And at this point we now need to tighten our stitches. So I'm going to turn it over, tighten that top and bottom stitch, and then just keep manipulating the stitches until they are all nice and tight. Once I'm happy that they are tight, I'm just going to give them a little flick just to make sure there's not too much movement on the back, and then I'm going to tie my loose threads into a double or triple knot. Once I've done that, I'm just going to trim my threads. I will trim them again later, but for now I'm just leaving a little bit there. And that is the second signature sewn in. So I'm going to grab my binder clips and just clip that signature together. Now, like I said, this might not work for everybody. You might find your threads get caught around your binder clips. You might want to take them out. This is just how I like to work. I'm now going to continue and sew the rest of my signatures in. And now all 5 of my signatures are done. So I now am going to trim those threads just a little bit shorter. I want to leave a little bit there, but I don't want to leave them too long. So I'm going to trim those down. Now my threads are all trimmed, I'm going to remove all of those binder clips. And at this point my little bead broke. So I'll get rid of all of those binder clips. And our signature block is all done. Now I'm going to just push those threads down. I'm going to go over those with a little bit of Fabri-Tac because I don't want those to loosen or become unstable when I glue my signature in. and I'm going to put a little piece of surgical tape over there and just push that down really firmly, just to hide those loose threads. And now my signature block is ready to glue into place. So that's going to look pretty cool, perfect fit. Now the next thing I want to do is just trim off some of the fabric from the top and the bottom. I want to make sure it's still going to fit at least the height of my journal, but I'm just going to trim off a small amount at the top and the bottom. So now I'm going to use Fabri-Tac to glue my two spine pieces together, the spine in the journal and the spine on the back of the book block. And you need to make sure you've got a really good coverage. I'm using Fabri-Tac because it is quick grabbing glue. Again, you can use any glue that you are confident in. So I'm going to very quickly make sure I get to the edges and that I'm filling in between those stitches on the spine. Once that glue is in place, I'm pushing at the top and the bottom and lining it up evenly at the top and the bottom with my spine in my journal. I'm then going to just run my fingers along those two spines to make sure they are level. It's a really easy way to put a spine together when you've got two perfectly matching pieces of board. Once I'm happy that's lined up, I'm going to just use my finger to burnish down to start with at the either side of that signature block, and then I'm going to work my way in between each signature, just giving that a little burnish just to make sure I've got really nice stick between my two spine pieces of board. Just rub that down in between each signature, and that's the last signature. And now I'm really happy with how that stuck. As you can see, I've got a pretty even gap at the top and at the bottom, and I will glue that fabric down a little bit more. I don't think I filmed that, but I do glue that little piece of fabric down at the top and the bottom just to cover the top of that book board. And now you can see those two pieces of board are lined up perfectly at the front and the back. So I just want to give that a little bit of time to dry. So I'm closing the book. I'm going to keep it spine side down, and I'm going to get myself two heavy books and just prop that up either side. I had to come back the next day, but that's now completely dry, so get rid of those books. And I am really happy with how this has turned out. It's perfectly lined up. It was really worth taking my time to get this right. And now we need to glue down the little flaps of fabric on the front and back covers of our journal. I'm just going to pop that up with my pin cushion. So I'm using Fabri-Tac because I am gluing down fabric. I'm going to run a bead of glue down that cover. I'm only going to do half at a time. Just wipe that a little bit with a piece of paper and just glue that fabric into place. I then do the same on the front. Then I go back to the back piece and I'll just glue down the rest of that fabric. And if you have any little bits sticking up, you can just add a little bit of glue and repair that, like this piece here. And now I've got quite a lot of fabric sticking out at the top and the bottom of my journal, and I'm going to trim that. That's what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to use my fabric scissors. I'm going to turn my journal on the spine. It's quite easy to hold its own weight because we do have quite a large signature here. And I'm just going to trim that fabric to the top of my journal and to the bottom of my journal. And I'm really happy with it. It's actually turned out much better than I was expecting, and you can see that we've got the fabric is a lot closer at the top and the bottom. Just remove a few threads and we've got a nice spine, nice and sturdy, and our signature is all in place. So now we need to cover the back and the front panels of our journal cover. Now I've cut a piece of cardstock to the size I want. You'll need to measure, it depends on the size of your cover. And what I've done is I've printed that contents page onto a piece of heavyweight card, and I have cut. So I'm going to glue my print onto my scrapbooking card. I'm just going to use a little bit of Pritt Stick in the middle, and then I'm going to go round the edge with my art glitter glue. I decided it was probably a good idea to move the journal out of the way, and I'm just going to line these up and glue them into place. So I did the same with the front, but I'm using the content section on the front of my journal, so you'll see that when you open the book. And then I just sewed around them. Obviously sewing is optional, you don't have to sew. And now what I'm going to do is glue these into the front and back cover of my journal. Once those are in place, I'm just going to ink that raw edge at the bottom. I don't think it notices that it's not red like the top and the sides, but I'm just going to ink that up a little bit. And there we have it. Our journal is done. So I'm really happy with it. I didn't actually think I would manage to get this sewn in at all. I hope the template is going to be useful for you. Like I said, Jodie Lewis did say that if you're printing from a phone or an iPad and you're printing at 97%, it's not going to fit, which I kind of knew that. You do need to print at 100%, but I do hope the template is useful. I do hope that you have managed to follow along, and I have tried to make it as clear as I can. So that is my journal all done. And don't forget, you can still get the kit at 40% off until the 1st of December. The calendar is on our website. All of the links will be in the description box below. But thank you so much. The next step is to decorate. Bye.